Well, Glenn, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. You've done a lot in your lifetime, in your career, helping people out uh, with many different problems, and you went through a lot yourself growing up. You want to start when you were a young kid and what you and
Yeah,
what
I started off young. I mean, obviously, we all start off as babies, and then you're born into the family, and you kind of follow the family around. And my dad, he was kind of a troubled person. He ran into um, a lot of issues with his career, and he couldn't decide really what he wanted to be. So as him and my mom are trying to make a family and raise us and so forth, he could not hold a job. So we kept moving a lot. And I I am 6'6" now, and when I was younger, I was always at least a head taller than everybody, usually more like a foot or more. And so I always stuck out. And when I was going through elementary school, I did not go to the same elementary school for more than 1 year. Actually, 1 year was the most. There was a lot of times I'd switch in between the years. And, all of us know when you go into a school environment, it's very intimidating. It can be very scary for kids. And when I would go into school, I was really into learning and I loved stuff, and I was always raising my hand and kind of, and then all of a sudden I'd become the teacher's pet, and then I'd start getting picked on. And, they'd start laughing at me when I would raise my hand and answer the question, and, because they didn't know the answer and they didn't want me to say it. And so I never really was able to make like close connections with kids. And if I did, it was so short lived. I mean, it was only like, at the most 9 months. So I started to become really, really angry. And I started to become really, almost antisocial, and was it was very hard for me to make friends and stick with them. So I kind of became a little bit of a lone wolf in a way, and I would attach myself to other outcasts. And we started fairly early around the age of 13, where I that's when I had my first um, experience with being intoxicated. And when I did, me and a buddy of mine went down to the basement of our house where we had a bunch of beer, and we challenged each other to drink three beers in the 6 pack. And it was warm beer, and it was Rainier beer, and it was nasty. But we each challenged ourselves to drink it down. And I tell people all the time that after at about a beer and a half, I had that feeling that went down through my body, and it was becoming intoxicated. And that feeling, I equated it with God. I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about. This is what you're supposed to feel like. This is feeling good. And from that moment on, I mean, I look back on my life many, many times, and I can tell you from that moment on, that and having a sexual experience were the only two things I cared about. And so I'm going to do whatever I can do to get those feelings, because that's where I felt like I was okay. I was safe. I was good. My dad was very verbally abusive. He was physically abusive, but not on a regular basis. But he was very, very difficult to grow up with. And so I was in trouble all the time. I had a principal who actually wrote my name on the paddle that he used. In Montana, they have corporal punishment, so I would get a paddle beating probably 2 or 3 times a month, mainly for doing stuff that boys do. We weren't allowed to tackle each other on the playground. We weren't allowed to grab onto cars and slide our way over to the gymnasium. So it was all innocent stuff, but I was always getting in trouble doing that. And it really, the turning point for me was right after my freshman year. My dad decided to move to Wisconsin from Montana, and it crushed me. It literally took a lot of the life out of me. It took a lot of what was enjoyable. And so from then on, it was all about the drinking and finding girls. And the best way for me as 6'6", and I loved basketball, but I was never going to be an NBA player at 6'6", as a center. So football became what I was going to do. And when I got a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin to play football, and I was getting recruited all over the country, and all of a sudden girls started paying attention to me. These recruiting visits I'd go on and I'd get absolutely hammered and just have the best time, and it was the crazy stuff we did, and I was hooked, man. I'm like, that's living, and so that became my mission. And it was a pretty ugly road, especially towards the end.
Yeah, so you were still able to keep up with being a high-level athlete in high school while also drinking on almost a weekly basis?
People ask me that, and it's you know, I've coached high school football for 30 years, and I watch these kids, and you can tell when a kid is not feeling good, or when he's hungover, or when he's not full go. And I often wonder, how was I able to do it? And I literally, Alex, would go and get hammered on a Wednesday night, a Thursday night, a Sunday night. I didn't on Friday, and I didn't on Saturday until after the game. And there were a lot of times where I was going in to do our squats at 6 a.m., and I had just come home from the bar at like 2:30. So I got about 2 hours of sleep, and I'm squatting like, 700 pounds on my back, and, going and puking and coming back and do it again. And it was a mindset that I think, and I tell people, especially kids, I'm like, when you play a violent sport, or any sport for that matter, you have to have that eye of the tiger, and you have to have that burning desire. And I think for me, the burning desire was the next high. It was the next girl I could get with. It was the next feeling. And when you walk out onto a stadium where there's 80,000 people screaming and yelling, and you're out in the field, that's a high that you cannot get anywhere else. And those were the types of things that I was really running towards.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people know the movie The Waterboy, in which where he became very good at football is because he took his past trauma and used it on the field. Is that something you would say you did?
I definitely did. I had a coach one time tell me, and I was a a lot of people thought I was a pretty nice guy, and I am a nice guy, but they were trying to get me to be a lot tougher. And this was right around, I think, my sophomore or freshman year. I had a coach who, he would say, listen, that last girl that you asked out and she said no, does that make you angry? And I said, yes. He said, take her picture and think of her face and put it on the guy across from you and go beat the shit out of it. And I was like, ooh.
Before Waterboy came out?
Yeah, this would have been 1978 or 79 maybe, 80. Yeah, right around the 1980s. So yeah, it was before Waterboy. And so I would look at that and I would like, wow. And then when I got to college, it got even more, and then I was strong enough and yeah, I almost every play and going against the other teams, I would imagine that they were somebody that I didn't like. And I'm like, okay, take it out on them, Yeah. You can't go beat him up because you're going to go to jail. So go put his picture on this dude and go after him. And I did. And I was a pretty aggressive player. And I didn't mind hurting people. It wasn't something that I felt bad about.
And I know college has a lot more stricter rules when it comes to your team and your coach and everything. So how was your drinking and partying during college? Was it exacerbated a lot more than it was in high school, or did you have to kind of suppress it a little bit for the rules of the team?
Every level it goes up. So when you're in middle school, to get to high school, you got to raise your game. You got to be a little bit faster. When you go from high school to college, same thing. College to pro, same thing. And for me, back in, so I went to Wisconsin in 1983, and they didn't start drug testing until I think 1986 or 87. And then, here was our rules in college. If we go to a bar and there's coaches in it, because drinking age back then was 18. So I was legal at 18, and I was 18 my senior year in high school, so I was legal very early. But the rule at Wisconsin was if you go into a bar and there's a coach in there, you leave. If a coach walks into a bar and players are there, they leave. So it was really not like it is today. They almost
Sorry, you
expected
said
you to party
coaches.
hard.
If the coaches walk in on the players, the coaches have to leave.
Yeah.
It's just
Who
un.
was ever at the bar first, it was like that. They are the ones that get to stay there. Whoever walks in, they got to go somewhere else. Because obviously the coaches aren't going to party with the players, but they didn't care that we were out partying. I mean, I walked. There was a number of times I walked in and the coaches were there, and I just gave them hey guys, have a good time, and I'd turn around and go somewhere else. But back then, like there was a time, and this is a scary story. Um, I basically flunked out of school my freshman year, and I had to go to summer school, and I had to get all A's. Well, there was a deal where if you lived at home, you still got your per diem for living. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make some extra money. I'm going to live at home. Well, it's a 50-mile drive from home. And one morning I was running a little late, and there was this Corvette that went flying by me, and I jumped behind him, and we were going like 90 to 100 miles an hour. And both of us got pulled over. And we're sitting on the side of the road, and the cop came up and he got my license. He goes, Derby, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, I got to get to class. I said, I got to pass this class. Otherwise, I'm not going to be eligible next year.
He's a big Wisconsin football fan.
Yeah, he was. And so he told me to sit tight. And they wrote the guy in the Corvette a ticket. And then both cops, one got in front of me, one got behind me, and they took me to my class with the lights on at 100 and some miles an hour. That stuff doesn't happen today, or at least you don't hear about it. So it was a different world back then. The drinking was kind of like almost not expected, but it wasn't like frowned upon. There were a lot of drunk coaches. I mean, I remember when I played at Green Bay, the coach there, man, he smelled like a brewery every meeting that we went to, and it was just kind of common practice back then. And I had, part of my story too is my dad was an Episcopal priest, and so I went to church a lot. I tried to read the Bible. I tried to be a good guy. I tried to do all the things. It just didn't work for me. So I never got to the part in the Bible where he tells you to be of sound mind and tells you to, be a sober and don't take things that mess with your mind. I never really saw all that. I didn't learn all that until much later in my life, and so I was kind of going on social norms, and it was pretty normal for college football players to be a bunch. I mean, we would get in fights at frat houses. I remember one time we went to a frat house, and a bunch of the players took their soda machine and dumped it upside down out on the street, and we were, they wouldn't want us in, and we banged the doors down, and the cops came, and it was just always crazy stuff like that was going on.
So you had a very good career at Wisconsin, and you entered the NFL draft, and
did.
Did you
Yeah.
get drafted by the New Orleans Saints? Was
I
it?
did. Yeah, I did. I played in the All-Star game, or I played in 2 or 3 All-Star games my senior year. Um, I played for in the Senior Bowl, and the coaching staff was the Seattle Seahawks coaching staff, and the team we played against, the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, was on there. So they were coming after me. But I was supposed to go in the top 5 in the draft my junior year, but we had our coach died spring of my junior year, and my redshirt sophomore year, and then I had another coach and then another coach, and the last coach that I had, he moved me from a tackle to a guard. I should have said no like my buddy did, and my buddy ended up he was the 4th pick in the draft, and I was supposed to go in the first or second round, and when I was sitting around waiting, kind of like Shedeur Sanders, I watched him this year, and it sucks when you got all these people telling you that you're going to be first, second, third round, and all of a sudden these rounds go by and you're still sitting there and you're calling your agent like, what the hell's going on? He's like, I don't know. Well, I started sliding, and I was one of those guys. I slid all the way down to the 218th pick, I think, by the Saints, and it was hard because there were 2 guys drafted before me that I had to beat out to make the team. So, and they were higher draft picks, and they ended up getting cut. So, I should have been a higher pick. I wasn't, and at the time I was very angry about it. Now I look at it, and it's probably saved my life because the way I was going, I didn't think I'd live to 30 years old. Alex, I woke up in the middle of the night on my 30th birthday in tears because I had no idea what to do or where to go because I thought I'd be dead by 30, and I thought I'd be playing football until I was 30, and it didn't work out. And I went through a divorce, went through a marriage, and I was just crushed. Now here I am, I'm sober. I got sober at 29, so I'm sober at 30 going, what do I do with the rest of my life? And
Yep.
it's been it's been an uphill challenge in a lot of ways.
I don't know if I asked, but were you into certain kind of drugs also in
Well,
college?
I was very anti-drug for most of my time. I didn't like pot. I would smoke it occasionally. Didn't really care for it. This is part of my story that is probably the turning point in my life. I play a game I was with the Saints. I played against the Green Bay Packers, and I had a phenomenal game. I played against an All-Pro. He got no tackles, and one time he got around me and he got his hand on the quarterback and caused him to throw an incomplete pass. Not a big deal. Well, when I came out of the locker room after I got all changed and my dad and mom were there and I was all excited to go, hey, I had the game of my life. I mean, I'm playing just spectacular. And I walk over and give my dad a hug. And he whispered in my ear, he said, God, if only you could have got that one play. And I went, are you freaking kidding me? I can't even please you at this level. I mean, it was like I just couldn't. I'm like, man. So I was in a huge depression. I got on the bus, we go to the plane, I fly home. We didn't have cell phones back then. As soon as I got to my apartment, I called my buddy and I said, I need as many painkillers as you can get me. And so he got me a bottle of Percocet. And I pretty much, after that game, I had no desire to play. I went to practice only because it was a paycheck. I started to lose any enthusiasm about the game. I started losing enthusiasm about women, everything. And I just started popping pills. And towards the end, I like what I heard in some of the meetings I went to, and they talked about how, alcoholism you can live with for quite a while in your life. You can live into being an older man, but drugs will take you down fast. And that's the truth. The Percocets, I was taking 5 to 15 a day for probably a year or two, and I was just a puddle. I mean, I was a mental mush. I
And you were
didn't
still
give a
playing
shit.
at this point.
I was, yeah, but not very
This
well.
was what made you
Not very
you
well. I was not
walk
playing
away
to
by
the level.
yourself, or just no one signed you.
Well, I was with the Saints so that happened. So I played with them the rest of the year, and then I was one of the first guys to be a free agent. Before that, there was no free agency. There was no players that left a team to go somewhere else unless they got cut. Well, I was one of the first guys to go free agent, and I went to Green Bay. I was supposed to go to Green Bay to be their long snapper, and then their long snapper decided not to retire. So I had to make it as a regular player, and I was starting at center and doing really well. And I had to do this one play where it's like a double read. I look here, and then I got to peel off to get a guy coming off the outside. And it was Bryce Pop coming in. This is practice. And this dude goes 100% every single play, whether it's practice or not. And he blew me up. He hit me right in the side of my head here, and my whole entire arm went completely numb. And I flew in the air, and I landed on the ground, and then my head hit the ground. So I kind of had a double concussion. And back then, they didn't stop you from playing when you got a concussion. They just said, you can say your name. All right, go. Well, I'm laying on the ground, and I could hear all the crowd that's around, and they're like, "Holy shit! Did you see that? Oh my God, that dude was flying!" And I'm laying there, and I can't move my arm, and the trainers are coming over, and they're trying to get me up, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, I can't see right. Everything was spinning, and I felt like I was going to puke." And they got me up, and then they got me into the training room, and then they had me at practice. I'd have to sit on one of these things and row like this. It was like a rowing deal. And I'm like, why am I doing this? They go, well, we got to keep you in shape, and you need to get your ass back out on the field. And I'm like, there's no way I can do that. My arm is like weak. I don't have any strength in it. And I decided to walk away. I went in and talked to the head coach and said, I can't do this anymore. And I walked out and drove home, and I was done.
What was your plan then on? Or you just thought, I'm going to leave and then figure it out
well,
after?
I was married at the time, and she's bitching at me about, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I played in the NFL, man. I'll be good. I go to my first interview. I throw my tie on. I'm looking all ready to go. So I go to my first interview, and I said, they said, so what's your experience? I said, well, I played in the NFL. And I smiled, and they looked at me, and they said, what else have you done? I'm like, what else is there? I said, I made it to the NFL. And they're like, well, that doesn't help us with what we need you to do. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, do you have a degree? And I said, no, I didn't finish it. And they're like, well, we aren't. And so I did that like probably 10 or 15 times at different companies. And I went home, and this was before I got sober, and I went home, and my wife at the time said she was leaving. She was going back to New Orleans because I was a loser and I wasn't going to get a job. And I'm like, screw this. And I ended up calling a friend of mine, Paul Christ, who was the head coach at Wisconsin, but he was a good friend of mine back in the day. And his dad was a coach at University of Wisconsin-Platteville. And I called him up and I said, I need help. I have to get my degree and I don't have any money. Because I spent all my money when I was in the NFL. I spent it on stupid stuff. But I ended up going to Platteville, and I got my degree, and then it started, and it just kind of one thing fell into another, and I ended up becoming a teacher, and I really enjoyed it for about 23 years.
And did you sober up at this point?
That was right about, so I was at Platteville. My ex-wife was in New Orleans, and I told her I had to quit. And so I quit drinking, and I didn't drink for about 3 months. Still took a pill here or there, not a ton, but I still was taking some. And she came back up. She tried to stay sober. She loved cocaine. And we tried to stay sober, but we didn't last very long. And ended up, I got a job in Milwaukee after I got my degree. I was selling fitness equipment, and she was a Miller Lite model, so she was doing gigs all over Milwaukee for Miller Lite, and we were doing okay, but we were still partying. And she came home one day and said, I have to go to treatment. I can't do this anymore. And I said, all right, I'll take you. And we go into the treatment center, and this guy, God bless him, I wish I could remember his name, but he was a counselor. He called me into his office, and he said, Glenn, we've got a bed for you. And I looked at him, I said, what? I said, I don't have a problem. I'm here to help support my wife. He goes, I think you've got a pretty good problem, dude. And I refused to go in, but he begged me to come to his outpatient. So on Monday, my ex-wife went into treatment, and I went home, and then I went to his outpatient on Monday, and he started reading all the characteristics of an alcoholic or a drug addict, and I'm like, oh my God, I hit almost every one of them. And I had always thought an alcoholic was some street bum with a bag and a bottle in the bag with no shoes on, barely making it. I thought that's what an alcoholic was. Then he started explaining how, there's the productive alcoholics, or the ones that, they can keep a job, but there's all this other stuff. And so he went over all of this stuff, and I'm like, wow, that is me. So after the meeting, I went to him and I said, so what do I do? And he goes, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to quit drinking today. He said, don't stop the pills. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Thursday, he said, okay, we're not going to have we don't have group until Monday. So you're going to go home. You're going to get a whole bunch of water. You're going to tell all your friends to leave you alone. You're not going to answer the phone. You're not going to do anything, but you're going to stay in your house for 3 days. So have enough food, have enough water. And he goes, you're going to dump all your pills into the toilet and flush them, and then you're going to call me and tell me that you did that. So Thursday I did that, And he said, you're going to have a miserable weekend. He said, but just hang in there and come to me on Monday and don't use or drink. And so I did. And Alex, it was the worst weekend. I was curled up in a ball. I had like fever, like I was every joint in my body, my fingers, everything was just hurting. And I'm laying in bed just screaming and sweating, and it was wet. And then I go on the floor. And 3 days, but I finally, on Monday, it was pretty interesting. Monday morning, I woke up and I'm like, oh, I feel pretty good. So I went to work, and then I went to the group and I told him, and he goes, yeah, he goes, withdrawing from narcotics is bad news. He said, but there's nothing you can do. You can't give them any medication. You just have to go through the withdrawals. And he said, now you're going to stay sober. He goes, you're not taking any pills, and you're not drinking any alcohol, and you're going to start working a program, and we're going to get you sober. And that was January 28th of 1994.
Did you have any itch to get back on the pills or alcohol?
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what was the secret?
The secret for me was having people to call. I had met a couple guys in treatment, and then I went to a couple meetings, and I met a couple really cool guys, and we started hanging out. We drank lots of coffee. Right after the treatment, my ex-wife, she went back to New Orleans, so I didn't really have her support. So I was looking for and I got about probably 10 or 12 guys that I met in the meetings, and I would call them, and I'd go over to their house. We'd play cards and drink coffee, play cards, drink coffee. There was a couple sober houses where they had dances. We'd go to the dances. We were all into riding Harleys, so we all rode all over the place, and I got with a bunch of guys that were sober and stayed sober. And when that craziness started happening in your head, I'd get a hold of them and go hang out with them and stay there until I felt better.
Good.
I haven't had it's interesting. I have not had a craving for probably, I don't know, 7 to 10 years. I went through a really rough divorce not too long ago, and there was one time where I was to the point where, you know what, screw it, I'm older. Now this is my third marriage. Why even bother? And thankfully, through the grace of God, He put the right people in my life, and I didn't use.
Definitely. And you also coach kids through addiction and anger issues.
I do.
What are your keys to getting over either anger issues or addiction?
Well, addiction and anger are not, they're two separate beasts. Addiction is, I like to say, you have two people. You've got the addict and you've got the person. Kids up until probably 22-ish or so, 22 to 25, they're kids. They need positive, strong messages. They need somebody to give them hard messages, but from somebody that cares about them. The number one thing that I found, and I worked with mostly boys, is that majority of the kids that had troubles, that were in addictions, they did not have a positive male role model in their life. They might have had a dad, but he was usually, it could be an alcoholic, or it was a stepdad who was really angry, and they just didn't have that positive male person that gave them value. So the key to having most of the kids that I worked with is trying to find somebody for them to get as a mentor, or someone in their family. Like I would look for grandpas, or I'd look for uncles, or I would look for brothers, and say, this kid really needs somebody to care about him, and it needs to be a male. Females are great. I mean, mothers have done great jobs, but I'll tell you, for boys, most boy mentalities, they learn how to manipulate their moms, and they use almost anything to do it, and it doesn't affect them in a negative way. They almost feel like that's what they're supposed to do, and that's lacking that male person in their life. So so for the addiction, when you get addicted, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. Now, anger, here's the thing that I learned, and this is where for 40 years I tried to teach anger management. I went to anger management. Here I am at like 50 years old, and I still have this major rage problem. Like, I would get so mad at my last wife, and she would like, man, you better go get some help. So I'd go in and I'd get anger management, and I did it for many years. And anger management didn't work for me. All those techniques that they told me, they didn't do shit. They maybe brought it down a little bit, but I was still angry. And I'd go do the things that they said, and I'd still be angry. And one little thing that she would say would set me off. So I found out that I didn't have an anger problem. The last time that I went to go get anger management, I said to the counseling agency, I said, I don't know what the hell you guys do. I said, but I've been to so much anger management and none of it's worked. And this counselor that I got, he said, I have a feeling I know what the problem is. And I said, okay, well, I hope so, because I'm sick of this shit. So I went in and I started meeting him, and after about 8 months, he looked at me and he goes, Glenn, you don't have an anger problem. As a matter of fact, you should be angry for all the things that are going on with you right now. And I said, well, then why am I raging so bad? And, he goes, because you've got a trauma problem. You're getting triggered. So when I would blow up, it had nothing to do with what was going on right now. It was triggering my memories from when I was a kid. And so I'm trying to get that need of comfort or care or something that I needed to calm me down. And all I'm doing is getting triggered. So all that did was just kept erasing my emotions. So I ended up having to do a lot of trauma work. And it was about 1.5 years of like going to do EMDR. We started to reprogram the brain. So I got a really good analogy of what worked for me. Is he said, so you're sitting at the breakfast table, you're about 9 years old, you spill a glass of milk, your dad starts screaming and yelling at you, damn it, we're going to be late for work, you're going to cause me to get fired, da 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 da. The whole way to school he's yelling at you, saying when you get home you're going to be whatever you call it, you're going to not curfew, what's that called, grounded. You're going to be grounded, and you're going to have to clean the house and clean this. And so you get out of the car, you go into the school, you feel like crap, you're like, oh, I don't want to go home, this is terrible. You go home, it's horrible, blah blah blah. 30 years later, you're sitting at the breakfast table, you spill a cup of coffee, and your wife gives you a look, and you blow up, like crazy blow up, and you're like, and you're just mad, and you're like, I didn't mean to do it, and she's just looking at it like, what's wrong with you? Well, you got triggered. So you go back to those memories, and so here's how it's supposed to go: is you spill the milk, your dad yells at you, you're in the car, you're going to school, your dad goes, Glenn, I'm really sorry I yelled at you. I got mad. I know it was a mistake. Let's figure out a way to do it better so that we don't have to be in a rush. Let's get you out and get you at the table, get you drinking your milk 20 minutes before. Let's get you out of bed earlier. We'll clean it up when we get home. You're not grounded. You're not in trouble. You get out of school. You know you made a mistake. You go to school. You have a good day. You go home. You see your dad. Everything's good. 20 years later, 30 years later, you spill that cup of coffee. Your wife gives you a look, and you look at her and go, honey, I'm really sorry I spilled that. I'll take care of it. I know you're in a hurry. I love you. Have a great day. And you don't blow up. That's the difference between, and I thought it was anger management. I thought it was an anger problem, but it was a complete trauma problem. And I kept getting triggered. And I found out too that all 3 of my wives had very similar characteristics to my dad. So I picked them, and I'm trying to get that love that I wanted to get from my dad. I'm trying to get them from my wives, and I'm not getting it. And so it's just setting me off like I was when I was a kid.
So it's basically like taking those situations, whenever you get mad, and anybody can practice this. Whenever you get mad, you kind of think of why you're getting mad. Kind of like think a little deeper into it.
Yeah.
For every situation, and kind of try to fix that situation, I guess.
Well, and here's Alex, this, you'll love this. So my counselor taught me this. He said, take your hands and just start rubbing like this. And basically what you're going to do is every morning you're going to get up, and on all your computer, iPad, screens, your phone, you're going to put a picture of something that you were really happy with when you were a kid. So I have this mountain scene where I was up in the mountains and I was absolutely I can never remember being happier than when I was up there playing in the wind and looking at these mountains. And I was thinking about camping down in this thing. So I put those on my screen. For 2 minutes, I would just look at that screen every morning and I would rub my hands and I would think about how awesome it was.
Association.
Yep. And so when you start to feel a little bit agitated or a little bit mad, and I still to this day do it, and I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years, I'll just start doing this. And then I just close my eyes and I think of that. And what you're supposed to be thinking of is a good time in your childhood. And then what you do is you say, is what's going on right now something that's very important or not very important? Is it something that's really urgent? Like you need your anger if someone walks in your house with a gun, or if somebody's going to hit you, or there's a good purpose for anger, but not when it's something that's like triggering you. So when you get that, you go, okay, this is most likely from my childhood. I don't need to deal with it right now. So whoever you're having a conflict with, or wherever that anger or that uneasy feeling is, you say to them, let's talk about this in a couple days. I need to just go and just need to relax. And then you go and you think really good thoughts and you start, I do a lot of praying. I'll go and start talking to God and I'll say, it's God, there's no reason I should be getting upset because she or he or whoever it was, they really weren't trying to do anything to me. Please take that feeling away. Please help me so that I don't get triggered by it. And if you do that on a regular basis, it goes away. It's been probably, God, I bet you it's been 2.5 years since I've had any kind of a anger episode. I get frustrated, absolutely. We had Giardia go through the house, so the dogs were pooping all over the place. That got me a little upset, but that's something that's like, legitimate you get upset at. You get tired of cleaning up poop. But it's not something you go crazy over. And, I used to throw things. I'd like throw things through the window. I'd get in my truck and squeal the tires and go racing around the neighborhood, screaming and yelling, top of my lungs, cranking music, I don't do any of that anymore.
I agree. I think delaying, that's something that's worked for me. Not saying I'm an very angry person, but whenever I do get angry, definitely delaying the anger and giving yourself time to think about it. I saw this, I forgot who did it, but they said whenever they are with their significant other and they start getting mad at them, they'll go in separate rooms and just text each other because it gives you time to think. People, when you blurt out things and hurt people, you really don't mean them. So when you get to type it, you get time to think about what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
that's a good way to do it. I always, I like the whole thing of finding what your love language is, because, like I know mine is touch. So anytime I'm in a relationship, if I'm in a bad place, I'll tell my partner, just touch me, just come over and give me a hug, just kind of rub me a little bit. Man, I just get soft right then. It's like, okay, there's nothing in the world that is better than that. And so it always makes me feel good.
Who's your ideal, I guess, client? What do they look like? What are they going through? Is it
I do work with very rarely do I work with like active addicts or alcoholics. One of the things that I really feel strongly in is that, if you really want to get sober, go to a meeting, find a program, go to the counselors that work on that. So I'll tell people, I'll help you, but you don't call me if you've been drinking and don't call me if you've been doing drugs. And so I don't work real well with like the people that are first getting sober. I work really well with people that are in difficult relationships, like they're on the verge of getting divorced or they're, fighting with their spouse or their girlfriend all the time. And usually, almost all of them, you'll find some kind of childhood issues that are running the show, and a lot of it is maturity. So I try to help men get more mature, be more of a man. If you're someone who reads the Bible and follows Jesus, he tells it exactly how to be a man. It's so crystal clear. And I wished when I was younger I had somebody teaching me that the exact way to become a man, because I think I would have become mature and would become more of a man earlier in life, and I wouldn't have done all the dumbass things that I did. But it happens when it happens, and I've learned it now. So my ideal client is probably former athletes that are struggling with their emotional regulation, people that are in bad relationships that want to salvage it. And then I do work with people who have been sober for a while and they're just not enjoying life. I help them. Like one of the things that I love is this guy named Michael Chernow taught me this probably about 7 years ago, I think. And he said, when you get up in the morning, the first thing you got to do is smile. He says, do it for 20 minutes. Go in the bathroom, smile at yourself. Tell yourself, hey, it's going to be a great day. And just sit there and smile. I guess there's a physiological change in the brain when you have that smile on your face every morning, and it literally changes your whole entire outlook on the day. And I was working out at this facility, and I would go in there all the time, and I always had what they call a resting bitch face. I always look like I'm upset. And I'm just thinking about whatever. And this young lady at the desk looked at me and says, "Wow, you're doing really good." And I'm like, "Well, thank you. Why do you say that?" She goes, "Well, you always have a smile on your face." And I said, "Really?" I said, "I didn't used to." She goes, "No, I was scared to death of you. I thought you were coming in to kick my ass." I said, "Really?" I said, "I didn't realize that." So now when I see somebody, I automatically smile. It's like, if you smile at someone, you're going to change the whole entire dynamics of that conversation.
Yeah, people say smiling's contagious.
It is. And so is the frowns. Both of them are. You can create negative bullshit fast. I used to do it at work all the time. I'd be in a bad mood, I'd get everyone else there in a bad mood. That way I didn't feel like I was alone. And I wished that I would have known all this stuff now. It would have been a lot better place to work. So yeah, you can change that, and I do that I help a lot of people do that. It's and now I've actually just recently I've created a 7-week program that helps people with complex post-traumatic stress, and it's to help people get out of this trauma and get into the happiness and the joy that God talks about. He wants us to be happy. He doesn't want us to be miserable. He definitely wants us to be happy. So, but many of us don't know how. Watching social media and watching news media and listening to people talk, man, it's almost impossible unless you change it. Social media can be spectacular. There are so many good people on there. There's so much good things to see, but you have to be adamant about looking for it.
What are the biggest mistakes kids my generation and younger are making in regards to this whole depression epidemic with kids my age, with social media and everything? What are people doing wrong, and how can people change it?
Well, I think some of it is the instant gratification. When I was younger, we didn't have cell phone. I still remember when Pong first came out. I don't know if you know what Pong is, but it was like a table tennis thing on TV where the ball goes and you move the thing up and hit it and it goes. There were people that spent tons and tons of time playing that game. When you sit and you're not active, which is, I watch, one of my daughters loves to lay in bed and look at YouTube. And she'll sometimes spend 2 or 3 hours doing that. Well, that's depressing. That's, I think, getting active, going and doing things is so much better for you than sitting on a screen or that. I think what you need to do is you need to schedule some time, like maybe 2 hours at the most, but not 2 hours in a row. Half an hour at 10 a.m., half an hour at 3 p.m., a half an hour at 8 o'clock or whatever. And that's it. And then go tell your friends, let's go for a walk. Let's go down to the lake. Let's go play some volleyball. Let's go do this. And get yourself going. I see a lot of the parents are or a lot of the families are single parent families. I see video games and TV as the babysitters. I see parents not involved with their kids. They don't do things and help them go. They just basically make sure there's food on the table and they got a place to live. And that's it. Well, that's very depressing because kids need to feel valued. They need to feel like they're important. And right now, your generation is being told by the older generation that you guys are lazy and you don't do shit. And, you know, that's going to wear off on you and you're going to believe it. It's not true. Is it true that you don't have the work ethic that some of the older people do? Yeah, maybe. But do you need that kind of work ethic? We're not an industrial nation anymore. We're more of an intellectual nation. You don't need the hardcore, like, you know, tough labor kind of people. There's still a place for it, but it's not like the massive. It's like, you know, when I was growing up, most people had a father, uncle, or somebody in their family that worked really hard labor jobs. So those are the people that I think sometimes get hard on the younger people. Your generation needs mentors. Your generation needs to find people like, hopefully like me or others that are a little bit older that have been through a bunch of bullshit and have figured it out and are going to try and teach them. I see there's a lot of conflict and problems with how to date and find your partner. And I think that's very depressing. Dating sites are not healthy in my opinion. They're like a menu, like you schedule a menu of items of what you want. And most of it's physical. I don't think that helps you guys. I think there needs to become a better formal way of like asking a girl out, or, you know, like I talk to my daughters all the time. I'm like, how come you guys have never really gone out with guys? Well, nobody ever asks. And I'm like, you know what? Guys don't ask girls out anymore. They just they send a couple Snapchats to them and say, hey, look at me. Do I look good? Let's go, you know, get together. There's never a formal, hey, would you like to go out for coffee, or would you like to go for dinner, go to a movie, something like that. You know, your generation doesn't do that kind of stuff. And I think there's a lot of confusion. Plus, I think you've got a lot of confusion on, like, you know, sexuality, your gender stuff. I think some of that stuff is really playing havoc on people, and they're kind of like using it as, well, you know, kind of like I felt like I was going to die drinking. I was like, I love alcohol so much, I figured I'd be dead by 30. Well, that's not really the way to live, and many people don't live that way, and you know, you got to find a better way to live. And I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I look at your generation.
For sure.
A little bit, they're confused.
Yeah. And lastly, to cap this off, if you had one piece of advice or something that your dad would have told you the day after you took your first drink when you were 30 years old, one thing he could have told you that would have changed your trajectory, what do you think it would have been?
Wow, that's a powerful question. So there was one time I was laying in my bed, and it was a 3-story house, and I was in the basement, but the basement had a window that overlooked where the parking garage was. And I woke up at like 8 o'clock because I heard some noise outside my window, and there was my dad cleaning all the beer cans out of my car. So I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. I went back to sleep, woke up a little bit later, I went upstairs. My dad was sitting in his chair reading his book. Mom was making breakfast. Dad looked up at me and said, hey, how you doing? I said, I'm good. He said, how was your night last night? I said, it was okay. He goes, oh, you got any plans for the day? And I said, not really. He goes, okay, well, have a good day. You know, and that was it. I'm like, I'm watching him take all these beer cans out of the car, and I wish that my parents cared enough. It's not that they didn't care. It was, I don't think they knew what to do about it. They didn't do anything. There's a song from, I think, Mel Tillis or one of those guys that he sings, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for everything. And my dad fell for everything. He didn't stand up to me, not once. He didn't stand up and say, I'm going to take you to counseling, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, whatever. He just ignored it. So I guess my answer in a long way is, I wished he would have stood up and made me look at what I was doing and help me change it.
So in a sense, your dad enabled you to
Oh,
continue
absolutely.
your
Oh,
whole your parent.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I was craving, and I think all boys, and I think girls do too, crave our somebody to tell us what to do, somebody to hold us accountable to what to do. You know, kids are raising kids. They're not holding each other accountable. They're going for whatever feels the best. You know, you got all these alcoholic and drug addict parents. They're not holding their kids accountable. They're trying to hide from them. They're trying to
They
not.
even hold themselves accountable. So how are they going to teach their kids the right thing to do?
Exactly. So I craved having my dad be a man. I used to think he was the weakest little coward, and you know, he was a big dude, but he was a coward. I mean, he would always like do this, and I'd be like, and I'd walk up to him, go like that, and he'd go like this, and I'm like, Dad, you're such a wimp, you know. And it just, I would have loved to have had a father who stood. I stood up to my girls. I mean, they're great kids. They're doing really well. I didn't put up with bullshit, and I let them know I'm not going to. You are going to act this way. You're going to be this way. When you're an adult, do whatever you want. And so they're both adults now. I don't tell them anything. I don't. I'm like, you know, do you need my help? If you need my help, I'm glad to help. But I don't tell them. I don't parent them. They're doing just fine.
Looking.
And I think it's because they knew how they stood. They knew where they stood. They knew what they were supposed to do. And I think they loved it. And so I craved it, and I didn't have it.
And I'm not saying that parents should be super strict or super lenient, but there's definitely a spot to be on that scale where it's not too strict, but you care about what your kids are doing. You make sure they're on the right path, because now that I'm 25 and thinking back to college, middle school, it was always the parents who didn't really care about their kids and what they did. They just kind of let them do whatever, are the kids that are screwed up now, you know?
Right. And you're absolutely right. There's a difference between abuse and accountability. You know, as a coach, my favorite coaches were the ones that got on my ass so hard, and they would ride me. But here's the difference. When I looked at them in the eye, I could tell they cared about me. And they were doing that because they wanted me to do better. And so as a coach, I would do that. Same thing with my daughters. The first thing I would tell them is, you know, I really love you. And because I love you, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm doing it out of love because I really care about you. That's the difference. If you're going to beat their ass, I mean, I see people on social media say, our world needs more ass beaters. And they need, you know, people that, no, that doesn't. Jesus, you know, and again, if you follow Jesus, he tells you everything the right way. I mean, you are always leading with love, always leading with love, always leading with happiness, always leading with positive. Always. There's no need for the negative abuse and that damages kids. I was damaged. I mean, I know the abuse that I took was very damaging. And it took me years and years and years and years to get over it and get through it. I could have had a whole different life had I had the right kind of upbringing, as you're talking about.
Is that a correlation you're seeing with kids you coach or mentor, that the poorer the parents treated them, the more screwed up they are as kids?
Absolutely. You can see it so easy. They're needy, they're desperate, they're angry, they don't feel like they're worth the crap. They quit so easy. I mean, they get yelled at one time and they quit. You know, there's just no like fire in their soul. It's like it's been robbed from them, and it's really sad. I'm hopeful, like I tell my daughters, I'm hopeful that there's enough of you guys that are going to do it right, that you can continue to build a future for many, many people and your kids and so forth. You got to get in good relationships. You know, if you're not in a good relationship, don't keep waiting for it to get better. Get out, you know. Find somebody that's on your same character and your same way of seeing things, because then you'll have a happy relationship for a long time. And if you have kids, they're going to be much more happy and they're going to be much better. So too many people get into relationships too fast. You know, they look good, they're great in bed, whatever. Those are all fine and good, but if you don't have that character and you don't have the same likes of things, it ain't going to work. And then those poor kids.
And I feel like it takes pretty quick to figure out what someone's about, you know? Within maybe, I mean, people can kind of fake it a few dates, but
Yeah.
after a few months, you can kind of tell.
Well, I love there's a book called How to Avoid Dating a Jerk. And it has five basic rules. Rule number one is get to know the person. And you can't get to know somebody in less than 6 months. An alcoholic cannot drink for 6 months and they can bare knuckle it. A bipolar person can keep their bipolar in order for 6 months. A asshole can be a nice person for 6 months. So you got to at least 6 months. Most people are in a serious relationship within the first month or two. The second thing is, can you trust them? The worst thing for a relationship is dishonesty. And if you have an alcoholic problem, most likely you're also dishonest. So that's a big one. Then the next one is, can you rely on the person? If you're sitting at home watching a football game and your girlfriend, and she knows you're home watching a football game, and your girlfriend has a flat tire, and she calls you, and you don't want to leave the football game to go help her with the flat tire, you can't rely on him. He's a punk. That's done. And then on the fourth one, you make a commitment. Well, once you make that commitment, then you can get physical. Well, unfortunately, the physical is always the first one or two places, and so that's why most people don't realize they're in with people that have all kinds of red flags and are bad for them.
For sure. And I love how you said that when you see an alcoholic, they're usually pretty dishonest.
Yeah.
Whenever I see someone who, you hear they cheat a lot, they're alcoholics, they're degenerate gambler, they automatically don't really trust them as much, like off the bat, Do you see that?
The other thing that, Alex, that's being thrown around a lot is narcissism, and that someone who has an alcoholic problem or a drug problem are almost automatically narcissistic. So they can get sober and work a sober program and they no longer are a narcissist. A true narcissist, there's very little help for them. So I think a lot of the people that are being called narcissists in today's society is because they have a drinking or drug problem. And that's what's causing the narcissism in the way they deal with people. If they can get sober, you might have a chance. If they don't get sober, you don't have a chance in hell. I mean, I hate to say it, but you're not real smart if you decide to stay in a relationship with someone who is either a narcissist or has a drug or alcohol problem.
Definitely. And I just speaking on this, I just thought of one last question. What do you think about ego? Why is ego the enemy? I just started reading this book by Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy.
It is the enemy. And I'll tell you what my opinion is on it, and maybe, I don't know if I haven't read that book, but I'd love it if you would tell me if I'm right. Some people say it's ego, E-G-O, edging God out. I think what it is, I think it's because if you read the book, How to Outwit the Devil, phenomenal book. And it talks about, what does the devil like? The devil likes lazy people. The devil likes arrogant people. The devil likes narcissistic people. The devil likes alcoholics. All those characteristics that are like not such good characteristics, he loves those. So he loves an arrogant asshole. He loves somebody that's in their ego because there's no humility. And God talks about all the time, he wants humble people that are trying to help the 1 in 99. They're trying to help the prostitute at the well. They try to help the people that are transgender. They try to help the people that are having issues that are not the norm. And you have to be humble in order to help those people. And ego edges those people out, edges your humility out, and causes you to be very selfish.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, thank you for coming on the show. Is there anywhere people can find you?
Yeah, go to my website, Glenn, 2 N's, Derby, D-E-R-B-Y. I'm on all the social media platforms with my name, so it's pretty easy to find me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Alex. It's been good talking to you.